Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christine Bliss, president of the Coalition of Services Industries, and I want to extend a very warm welcome to our attendees this afternoon. We appreciate you joining us. We have a great lineup of speakers today who will be exploring this year's conference theme, expanding global services and digital trade opportunities to promote inclusion, sustainability, and to meet national security challenges. A few quick numbers to underscore why services matter so much. Services matter across the board for U.S. competitiveness. The majority of U.S. states export at least $5 billion in services a year. And services don't matter just in their own right. They're tightly integrated into goods and farm products in the form of financing, logistics, and cloud computing, distribution services, and many more. In fact, services have grown to account for over a quarter of the value of inputs in U.S. manufacturing. The U.S. is a global leader in exporting services, and our trade surplus in services of over $700 billion in 2023 helped offset our trade deficit on the goods side. Many of these services are taking digital form. In fact, 3/4 of total U.S. exports of services are now capable of being delivered via the internet. And these digitally enabled services have become an important new source of U.S. competitive advantage. I would be remiss in talking about services if I didn't mention the important role of foreign direct investment for services. It remains the primary means that services are delivered. And it's not about offshoring. It's about the fact that many services are heavily regulated. And financial services is a prime example. Telecom is another one. So in many instances, companies and services companies have to invest abroad in order to provide their services. Now, we know that the administration is pushing very hard for more investment in infrastructure and other areas in IPEF, for example. And so what's very important to note, if you put those two pieces together, the importance of investment, foreign direct investment for services as a primary means of delivery, the fact that the administration is pressing so hard for critical infrastructure investment, it's critically important that that investment have safeguards and investor protections. And so that's another area that CSI is very concerned and supportive of. So as I said, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that. Now, while services are a powerful driver of economic growth, barriers to services in digital trade and investment have been steadily growing. That's why it's so important that we push for an affirmative U.S. trade agenda that promotes services. On that front, let me take a moment to recognize some powerful sources of momentum for moving services and digital trade to the forefront of the agenda. At home, we appreciate and endorse the recent recommendations by the President's Export Council to reinvigorate WTO discussions on liberalizing services trade, including recommending a reinvigoration of the TISA services negotiations. Just as important, the PEC also called for reasserting U.S. leadership on digital services trade, both in the WTO and in the Indo-Pacific framework. We were also very encouraged by the June 10 White House blog post from the Council of Economic Advisors that recognized the critical importance of services and digitally enabled services. On the international front, the WTO, JSI, and e-commerce has made crucial progress in establishing rules for digital trade and established a critical foundation to build upon. We're fortunate today to be able to host a panel of the JSI co-conveners as well as Deputy DG Joanna Hill a little later as part of the conference. Finally, I want to commend the OECD for all of their work on services and digital trade and applaud their new study, Revitalizing Services Trade for Global Growth, which focuses on services barriers and the $1 trillion that would be saved through removal of those barriers. And also their thoughts and recommendations on the path forward, which is critical. We're so pleased to tell you that the report has been released today, And this evening, we're very honored to host Secretary General Matthias Cormann as the keynote speaker at our dinner, where we will present him with CSI's Global Services and Digital Leadership Award. The OECD is already playing an essential role in building out digital governance frameworks in areas such as data flow and AI. The report the OECD has issued today focuses a persistent problem that service suppliers face, which is the growing number of trade barriers, especially in the digital space. As the OECD points out, there is an urgent need to tackle these trade barriers by pursuing commercially meaningful trade discussions and initiatives on market access, which should be part of the agenda. I will just say we could not agree more. If you've already not done so, please feel free to take a copy of CSI's Services 101 Primer, which includes our recommendations for this and the next administration on the path forward on services and digital trade. We've also provided a copy of this statement by the Global Services Coalition on the WTO Joint Statement e-commerce negotiations and the No OECD study. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the summit. And I now have the pleasure of introducing our opening keynote speaker. And let me just say that we're so incredibly honored that she actually flew on a private jet so that she could get here in time, since, as you know, I think the House is out of session. And she really went out of her way to get here today. And so we really appreciate that. I will be having an armchair discussion with her upon her arrival. Our opening keynote speaker needs no introduction to those of you in this room. Representative Carol Miller has earned her reputation as a strong and effective advocate representing the 1st District of West Virginia, who brings her love of country, family, and commitment to common sense policies that help everyday Americans, to her role in the U.S. House of Representatives. Congresswoman Miller was elected to the Virginia House of Delegates in 2006, where she rose to become the first female majority whip. Since being elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2018, Representative Miller has fought for pro-growth, pro-trade policies in Washington that create jobs and opportunities for the people of West Virginia and the United States as a whole. As an accomplished member of the House Ways and Means Trade Subcommittee, Representative Miller has been a tireless champion of U.S. trade policies that open markets for U.S. digitally enabled services, small business owners, farmers, and manufacturers. In addition to being a wife, mother, and grandmother, Representative Miller is also a bison farmer and a small business owner. And it goes without saying that services are very important to the economy of the 1st District of West Virginia, as they are to every state and across the United States, accounting for 76% of total jobs. Services and digital trade are very important to the 1st District, accounting for $466 million in services exports in 2022 in areas such as business and professional services, financial services, and travel. Roughly half of these services exports are digitally enabled. And with that, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome our esteemed opening keynote speaker, Congresswoman Carol Miller, to the stage for an armchair discussion. And Congresswoman, I invite you to join me on the stage. Thank you so much. Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you. I got all these notes. Where do you want? Here. Is that okay? Sure. I'm sorry. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Where do you want it? Right here. All right. Thank you so much. I've been on the road since 5 a.m. this morning. Been up since 3:45. So forgive me if I'm Well, and Congresswoman, I mentioned to the audience that we're especially honored to have you because you went to the trouble, as I understand it, of flying on a private jet just to get here
I
in
did.
time.
Well,
Which is amazing. And the fact that you would come to DC a day early to be part of the summit, we can't thank you enough. That's
Oh.
just amazing. Thank you so much.
thank you, because honestly, you all should be talking to me. I shouldn't be talking to you because in my opinion, you all are the experts. As she said, I'm a wife and mother, grandmother of 7. I didn't run for office until after I'd raised my family, done as most women do, more volunteer work than you could shake a stick at, worn more hats than you could shake a stick at. And now I'm here trying to save the world. So I'm a very normal person who has led a life. Do you want to ask me questions?
Yes.
Okay.
So I was just gonna say, I also wanted to note on behalf of certainly CSI members, and I know others in the audience, that we are very grateful for your leadership, and on specifically and in advocating for high standard, commercially meaningful services and digital trade policies. And as you say, as a small business owner and farmer, you truly understand the critical importance of leveraging services, trade, and investment to advance U.S. global economic leadership and competitiveness and strengthen critical supply chains. So yes, let's begin our conversation. Let me start by saying we don't typically think of West Virginia as a service-oriented state, let alone your district. Yet you have been such a vocal supporter for opening up services and digital markets abroad for the benefit of all workers and small businesses in your district and generally. So why does digital trade matter to U.S. small business, farmers, manufacturers in your district and really throughout the country?
Well, you mentioned West Virginia. I'm going to go back 250 years ago when our country was founded. And it was founded on the freedom to survive, the freedom to prosper was up to you. And moving forward from that, I am from West Virginia. Have any of you been there? Probably to the Greenbrier? No? Well, that's, you have not been to the Greenbrier.
I have not, West Virginia is so beautiful. It has so many beautiful spots.
Well, that's what I was going to say. We are known for our energy because we have provided for a couple centuries the power for our country and for our states around us. I mean, you look at Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky, the mountains, the water. What we have are incredible natural resources. And so what worked for us as we've moved forward, you have to think ahead. And when you're talking about digital services and trade, well, trade, ever since the first caveman had 2 sticks and another one had 2 rocks, they traded. Commerce is what makes the world work. And we want to have a level playing field +1. You know, we're the United States. We have been the leader. So we would rather be playing from a field that works, that is, you know, comparable, competitive, and not doing what seems to be going on around the rest of the world and what they'd like to do to us. Is that short enough, long enough?
No, that's very helpful. So the OECD just issued a report today on the 10th anniversary of the Trade Restrictiveness Index for Services, looking at the last 10 years of barriers. And unfortunately, what the report shows is that barriers are increasing, not decreasing. And they also have some current suggestions on a way forward. And earlier this month, as I'm sure you know, the President's Export Council called for renewal of U.S. leadership on digital trade as part of prioritizing services market access and national treatment. And then in addition, the White House Council of Economic Advisors wrote a blog post illustrating the extent to which U.S. services trade surplus is driven by digitally enabled services products. And it also points out that US manufacturers are the second largest exporter of digitally enabled services. And so given the recent uptake and attention to digital and services trade from the private sector, the administration, and international economic institutions, and the latest insights on services barriers by the OECD, it would be great to know from your perspective why the US needs a strong services and digital trade agenda.
Well, that really is our biggest export, that and agriculture products. And we have excelled. And of course, the rest of the world would rather wear that crown than us. But I think in all fairness, we have done such a good job that we need to stay ahead. You look at the other countries and what they're trying to do around us. And when you talk about the attention that the Biden administration has been giving to this, that's brand new, because I've been on the trade subcommittee for 4 years, and all we've done is dance around and make trade suggestions. There hasn't been any good legislation that really, or policy that's been able to put us where we need to be and want to be. And that's worldwide. And so I think it's very important that we maintain being at the head of the class, so to speak. I went with a group of people to both Paris and Germany to talk about the OECD. And I wasn't very polite in Paris. I think I lectured them. I was a history major, so I just lectured them about history and what our history's been like since the 1700s and how many times we've bailed them out and what are they thinking. So the other guys just sort of smiled at me. It was like mom talking to you and saying, you know, get a life here. What are you even thinking about doing? The Germans, of course, were a little stiffer about it, but we have been the world leaders, and we have to have an administration, a strong administration that understands trade, that understands what we do and how we remain. And, you know, quite frankly, there's been so much activity from China around us and in our own part of the world that we really have to be very strong. I mean, Catherine Tai, I like her very much, and I'm sure on some level she's very frustrated with what we've been doing, which is not much.
I can't resist just making one point about the importance of strong services and digital trade disciplines, and that is, as a bison farmer, we're certainly aware that digitally enabled services are an important part of agriculture now, just in various ways.
Absolutely.
And it's not just in the chips and the tractors that take care of track soil quality, or cloud services predicting weather, but it's also chips in the hoofs of cattle, for example.
Cattle, please, not bison.
Not bison, not bison. But I don't know if on your farm you've found any digitally enabled services aspects, but I just have to bring that up.
Yes.
Maybe not with respect to bison, but certainly in terms of insemination of cattle, in herding cattle, things like that.
Absolutely.
Digital is very important. I don't know if that's true for bison, but I just couldn't help myself.
Well, it's a
'cause
good
the
segue.
connection-
It's a good segue.
connection with
Yes.
agriculture.
Absolutely, with agriculture. I know corn's been down. We're doing a lot with pork and a lot with beef, and digital is very important. I am a hobby farmer. I was a city girl that married a West Virginian. He is an automobile dealer. So my concept initially of business, you know, supply and demand and et cetera. But we started raising grass-fed animals. Bison were native all through our United States, and they just kept getting pushed farther and farther west. And so we try to eat healthily. And the next thing I knew, I had a whole lot of animals. And I was at the farmer's market 3 days a week, hawking my frozen meat and cooking, because I knew as a mother how to cook. And so, yes, I did send things frozen across the United States, exactly like you said, but it with us, really, it is a hobby, and it's for our consumption. I have it in 2 stores, and we're still pretty mom and pop, but absolutely digital is so important throughout the world, agricultural as well as, all goods that we do. I live on the Ohio River, and you all think of containers, you think of trains. Well, I have the major artery that comes down from Pennsylvania all the way down to Mississippi, and commerce happens on that every day. So and that is controlled the same way, and that goes all over the world. And of course, you ship coal all over the world. And so the digital services are so important, and we have to stay ahead of the game.
Right.
That at the end of the day. But again, I think you all are really the experts. I'm trying to make policy that is going to work, that's going to lift us up, but we need to have the right people in the right place in order to make this happen. I am the head of a tax team, which is supply chains. And I mean, gosh, we all saw in COVID how important all of that it was. And, all of a sudden we weren't getting medicine, we weren't getting formula, we weren't getting the things that you needed through a supply chain, let alone the chips and all those other entities. It was throughout the world.
Right. So I know we're short of time, but I just wanted to raise another important area, and that is at the WTO in the Indo-Pacific and in other parts of the world, the U.S. has stepped back from its support for and pursuit of high standard digital trade rules. And as we know, you're a great champion for us in that regard in pushing back. And the U.S. has also changed course from past administration ambitions to pursue genuine trade agreements. You've been a vocal critic of the administration's approach and have called for greater U.S. leadership on trade, particularly as it relates to services and digital trade. So what do you see the opportunities for greater engagement, and what role does Congress have? And I know you have an important piece of legislation too.
Well, we just need to, I don't want to sound terribly political, but I don't know how you can do this without it. We have got to have the right person in the White House that is strong enough worldwide. And, you have to have the right marriage in order to do the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which took years to put in place. 2025, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to the corporate rate? What's going to happen? You have to have the right people in the majority who understand what it's like to sign the front of a paycheck, not just the back. I mean, there's so many pieces to this that make what we're going to have to do in 2025 come back to fruition. And you have to have the right people that understand basic commerce, basic sales, basic trade, all of those things. I mean, we haven't done real well with Kenya, where it's the Indo-Pacific is so important. I mean, I stopped counting at 110 ambassadors that I have met with, just extending my hand as an American leader. How can we help you? And they all, I mean, when we started out all those years ago, we didn't have nearly what we have today. People want to have the same electricity that we have. They want to have all the same, the food, they want to have all these things that we have been able to do. And so in order for us to do it, we have to have the right policies in place.
Right.
Did I talk around the circle? You had all the right.
No, it's very good,
questions
but
right there.
I just certainly wanted to give you credit for, excuse me, your legislation that you've introduced.
Well,
And the United States Trade Leadership in the Indo-Pacific Act. And you have some creative ideas in there about creation of a commission and reports to Congress and involving the ITC. So I just wanted to commend that to everyone if they're not aware of it. Take a look at it, and I think members of Congress like you need to be thinking like along those lines about what can be done. So
And we have a good group of people on the trade subcommittee that are doing that. And thank you. I mean, I have been up since 3:45. So if I left out a detail or two, I'm sorry that, again, hopping from airport to plane to get here, what you all do is so important. And it's what makes us tick, and it's what makes the world tick. And so I came here out of support because I really strongly care about trade and what we do. And we got such wonderful policy in place before, and it's a shame that 2025, they're calling Tax-mageddon, but we've got to work on the corporate rate. We've got to make sure that those farmers who are farming their grandparents' farm, that they don't have to sell half the farm in order to pay the taxes. We just have to make sure that when you have people often feel, well, we'll do this and we'll just tax you a little more. They don't understand with business that that's exactly the opposite of what happens. If you tax them more, they put less into their business. They put less into their employees. They put less into the community. It's converse. It's reversed. It's important that we have a healthy tax that is competitive, that isn't, and I don't want my tax dollars going to other countries, period. I want our tax dollars coming here.
well, thank you so much, Congresswoman Miller, for your observations and thoughts on the way forward. This has been a very important and helpful conversation. And again, we thank you for your leadership, particularly on digital and services trade. And we really look forward to continuing to work with you. And I think everyone will join me in giving the Congresswoman a round of applause.
Again, it is very, very important to me that you all keep in contact with my office, with Max, with the people, because it could be one little thing that might fall through the cracks that makes a huge difference, or it might be that one little thing that lifts us up. And I think that's the most important thing, is for you to communicate with us. It's what you do for a living. And I just appreciate you all inviting me here, and it was
Absolutely.
quite a trip getting here, but I hope you have a great day for the rest of the
No,
time.
it was our honor.
Thank you.
Our
Thank
a
you.
real privilege for us. Thank you so much.